The antiseptic smell of the private hospital suite couldn't quite mask the scent of predators circling their prey. At 11 p.m. on a Tuesday in late September, Marcus Chen lay semi-conscious in his luxury room at Mount Sinai, stage 4 pancreatic cancer hollowing him from the inside out. He was 38 years old. Around his bed stood his brother Victor, 3 board members in tailored suits, and 2 lawyers with laptops open like weapons. The documents they'd brought would restructure Chen Technologies, $200 million in company shares placed in corporate trust, Marcus's 2 children reduced to footnotes in their own father's legacy. "Just here, Mr. Chen," the lead attorney said, positioning a stylus near Marcus's trembling hand. "One signature." They'd timed it perfectly, late enough that most staff had gone home, early enough that Marcus might have a moment of clarity through the morphine haze. Victor stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, face arranged in an expression that might have passed for concern if you didn't look at his eyes. That's when Elena Morales entered for her midnight cleaning shift. She was 32, undocumented, anonymous in her janitor's uniform, the kind of person people like Victor looked through rather than at. But Elena had been cleaning this room for 3 weeks. She'd watched this dying man weep silently when he thought no one could see. She'd heard him whisper his children's names, Lily, James, like prayers into the darkness. She saw what was happening immediately. Elena walked calmly to the laptop and shut it down mid-signature. The room erupted. Security was called. Victor's polished facade cracked into fury. But through the chaos, Marcus's hand found Elena's wrist, and his voice, barely a whisper but clear, cut through everything else. "She stays. Everyone else, out." Stay with us to discover how one moment of courage became the foundation for healing 3 broken hearts, and how a family was built not from blood or law, but from the revolutionary act of choosing to stay when everyone else had already left. It all started when the antiseptic smell grew sharper after midnight, when most of Mount Sinai's visitors have gone home, and the living can pretend the dying don't exist. Elena Morales pushes her cleaning cart down the hallway of the private wing, her sneakers silent on polished floors that cost more per square foot than her monthly rent. She's worked the graveyard shift for 3 years. She knows which rooms hold real sleep and which hold the shallow breathing of people counting their remaining nights. Room 1247 is the latter. Marcus Chen has been here 3 weeks. Elena has watched him deteriorate from a man who could sit up to one who barely opens his eyes. She's seen him weep when he thinks no one's watching, heard him whisper 2 names, Lily, James, like prayers into the darkness. She's never spoken to him. People like Marcus Chen don't see people like Elena Morales. She's furniture. A ghost who empties trash bins and mops up the evidence of mortality. Tonight, though, something is different. Voices spill from his room, not the gentle murmur of visiting hours, but the sharp edge of business being conducted. Elena slows her cart, instinct prickling at her neck. She's learned to sense predation, a skill honed by years of navigating the world while trying to remain invisible. She enters to clean as scheduled. 5 men in expensive suits surround the bed. One holds a laptop, its blue light harsh against Marcus's gray face. Another positions a stylus near Marcus's trembling hand. A third, older, similar features, colder eyes, stands at the foot of the bed like he's already dividing the inheritance. "Just here, Chen," the lawyer says. "One signature transfers the shares to corporate trust. Clean, efficient. Your children will be provided for." Elena empties the trash, watches. Marcus's eyes flutter open. The morphine drip beside his bed suggests he's barely conscious, barely capable of understanding that the documents on the screen are restructuring Chen Technologies, placing his 40% ownership in a trust controlled by these men, reducing 8-year-old Lily and 5-year-old James to footnotes in their own father's legacy. The lawyer positions the digital pad beneath Marcus's hand. "Right here, Mr. Chen." Elena walks to the laptop. "Excuse me?" the lawyer says, annoyed by her proximity. She reaches out and unplugs it. The screen goes black. The room erupts. "What the hell? Security! Get her out of here!" The older man, Victor, she's heard nurses call him, the brother, steps forward with fury, twisting his features. "Do you have any idea?" But Marcus's hand shoots out, gripping Elena's wrist with surprising strength. His eyes are open now, really open, clarity breaking through the medication like sunlight through storm clouds. "She stays." His voice is barely audible but absolute. "Everyone else, Out. Marcus, you're not thinking clearly. Out. The word costs him. He sags back against the pillows, but his grip on Elena doesn't loosen. The men gather their laptops and papers in wounded dignity. Victor pauses at the door, his smile sharp as a blade. We'll be back, brother, when you're more yourself. The door closes. The machines beep their steady rhythm. Marcus's eyes close again, his breathing shallow, but his hand remains on Elena's wrist for another moment, long enough to communicate what words can't. Thank you. I see you. Help. Then his fingers go slack. Elena stands in the silence, her heart pounding. She just stepped into a world that could destroy her. No documentation, no rights, no protection. She just made herself visible to men who will not forget. But she stays. She finishes cleaning the room. She remains through her entire shift, working quietly nearby, a guardian against vultures who smell death and see only profit. Sometimes staying is the most revolutionary act possible. 3 days later, David Park stands in the doorway of a 4th-floor walk-up in Queens, holding a briefcase that costs more than the building's monthly mortgage, and wondering if he has the right address. The apartment is small but immaculate. Lace curtains filter weak October sunlight. The scent of coffee and cinnamon hangs in the air. An elderly woman with silver hair and a neat bun opens the door wider, her eyes sharp and assessing despite her weathered face. Mrs. Morales, I'm David Park, assistant to Marcus Chen. I'm looking for Elena. She's sleeping. Night shift. The woman's English carries the music of Oaxaca. What does a dying billionaire's assistant want with my granddaughter? Direct. David appreciates that. To offer her a job. She has 2 jobs. This would replace them both. Abuela Rosa studies him for a long moment, then steps aside. You wait. I'll wake her. The living room is crowded with love, photos covering every surface, crocheted blankets draped over a sagging couch, a shrine to the Virgin Mary beside pictures of people who must be Elena's parents, young, smiling, gone. Elena emerges 10 minutes later, hair damp from a quick shower, wariness in every line of her body. She's smaller than David expected, younger looking, but there's something in her dark eyes that reads as ancient. She's seen too much. Mr. Park. David, please, can we sit? They settle at a small kitchen table. Abuela Rosa hovers protectively, pouring coffee no one asked for but everyone needs. David opens his briefcase. Marcus Chen wants to hire you as a live-in caregiver for his 2 children, $5,000 weekly, private suite in his penthouse. You'd start immediately. Elena stares. I'm a janitor. He's aware. I have no credentials, no training, no... She stops herself before saying papers, but David hears it anyway. He doesn't want credentials. 7 nannies have failed in 18 months. The children are unreachable. Marcus is terminal, 3 to 6 months. He wants someone who sees people, someone human. David leans forward. You saved him from signing away his children's inheritance. You stayed. That's the only credential he cares about. I clean hospital rooms. I don't know anything about... His daughter hasn't spoken in 4 months, David interrupts gently. His son has violent meltdowns 5 times a day. They've lost their mother. They're losing their father. An army of professionals with degrees and theories and treatment plans have accomplished nothing. Elena's hands curl around her coffee mug. Why me? Because you didn't try to fix him. You just stayed. The words land like stones in still water. Abuela Rosa touches her granddaughter's shoulder. Mija, he doesn't need someone to teach his children. He needs someone to see them. Elena looks between them. David watches her calculate the money, the risk, the impossibility of the situation. He sees the moment she makes her decision, though she doesn't speak it yet. I need to meet them first, the children, and him, when he's not... She gestures vaguely, meaning drugged, dying, desperate. This afternoon, I can drive you. I'll take the subway. Of course she will. David writes the address on his business card, adds the entry code. 4th floor, Marcus is expecting you around 2. After he leaves, Elena sits in the kitchen while her grandmother makes lunch neither will eat. You're going to say yes, Abuela Rosa says. It's not a question. I don't know. You recognized yourself in them? in him, the lost ones. Elena's parents died when she was 7. A drunk driver, a moment of terrible chance, and suddenly she was an orphan raised by a grandmother who spoke limited English and worked herself to exhaustion. Elena knows what it means to be seen through rather than seen. She knows what it means when the people who should love you are too consumed by their own grief to notice you're drowning. What if I can't help them? What if you can? At 1:47 p.m., Elena stands outside a building on Central Park West that looks like it eats people like her for breakfast. The doorman's expression confirms this. But David's code works. The elevator rises smoothly toward whatever comes next. She's terrified. She's already decided. Sometimes the most impossible offers are the only ones worth accepting. Elena arrived at 7 a.m. with everything she owned compressed into a single battered suitcase. The penthouse greeted her with the hollow silence of a place where people existed but didn't live. $15 million of real estate overlooking Central Park, and it felt like a tomb. She stood in the entrance, taking inventory of the emotional landscape. Children's toys lined built-in shelves with museum precision, wooden blocks arranged by size, stuffed animals positioned just so, a miniature kitchen set that had clearly never been played with. Every surface gleamed. Nothing was out of place. Nothing was alive. Photos of Diane Chen covered every wall. Beautiful, brilliant Diane with Marcus's arm around her waist. Diane pregnant, glowing. Diane holding newborn Lily. The images weren't memorials. They were shrines that held grief hostage instead of releasing it. Right then, Caroline, the departing nanny, materialized beside her, stick-thin, British, defeated. "Let's get through this quickly, shall we?" She spoke in rapid-fire bullet points. Lily, 8 years old, selective mute since her father's diagnosis 4 months prior. Communicates only through headshakes. Stands at the living room window for hours. Won't eat anything but plain pasta. Lily's room. Second door on the left, pink and perfect and untouched. James, 5 years old, 4 to 5 violent meltdowns daily. Destroyed 3 iPads. Bit the last nanny's hand hard enough to break skin. Hides under furniture, throws food, refuses all physical comfort. James's room, blue and pristine, toys organized in bins he never opens. Child psychologist visits twice weekly. No progress. No connection. No hope. "They're not reachable," Caroline said. And Elena heard the relief in her voice, relief that she was leaving. "I tried everything. Schedules, rewards, consequences, therapeutic play. Nothing works. They're just gone." She thrust a 3-ring binder at Elena. Daily schedule, meal requirements, emergency contacts, medication schedule for Mr. Chen. She was already backing toward the door. The housekeeper comes Mondays and Thursdays. The therapist visits Tuesday and Friday afternoons. Don't let James near sharp objects. Good luck. The door closed with a soft, expensive click. Elena stood alone in the museum, feeling the weight of other people's grief pressing down like fog. She found Lily exactly where Caroline had said she'd be, standing at the floor-to-ceiling window, 8 years old and already a ghost. Hollow eyes, thin shoulders, hands hanging limp at her sides, staring out at the city as if watching for something that would never come. "Good morning," Elena said softly. "I'm Elena. I'm here to stay with you for a while." Lily didn't turn, didn't acknowledge, just kept staring. Elena didn't push. She set down her suitcase and looked around for James. She found him under the dining table, knees pulled to chest, watching her with feral wariness. 5 years old and already certain that people left. That care came with conditions he couldn't meet, that his big feelings made him too much to love. "Hi, James. I'm Elena. Are you hungry?" He bared his teeth slightly. Not quite a growl, but close. Elena went to the kitchen, all marble and stainless steel, cold and perfect, and ignored the organic meal prep containers lined up in the refrigerator. She found eggs, butter, bread. Made simple scrambled eggs and toast. The smell of real cooking filled the sterile space. She brought 2 plates to the table, set one down, sat on the floor with the other. James emerged slightly, looked at the food, looked at her, then he picked up the plate and threw it. It shattered across the marble floor, eggs splattering, ceramic shards skittering. Elena didn't flinch, didn't scold. She simply began folding the cloth napkins into birds, something Abuela had taught her when she was 7 and drowning in grief. Her hands remembered the creases, the transformations. James watched from under the table, suspicious. Lily's reflection in the window showed her eyes tracking the movement. Elena folded 12 birds, left them on the floor, went to unpack. That night she found one paper bird on her pillow. The war hadn't ended, but someone had hurt her. Day 2 began with Elena ignoring Caroline's 3-ring binder entirely. When James refused breakfast, she let him. Didn't force, didn't cajole. Just covered his plate and went about her morning, humming softly in Spanish while she organized the kitchen to her own logic instead of someone else's system. At 10 o'clock, James emerged from under the couch, his new favorite hiding spot, and stood in the kitchen doorway, small and uncertain. "Hungry now?" Elena asked without looking at him directly. Prey animals spooked when you stared. A tiny nod. She taught him to crack eggs himself, made a massive mess, shells in the bowl, yolk on the counter, egg white dripping onto the floor. Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper who came and went like a silent wind, appeared and frowned at the chaos. Elena smiled at her and kept going. "We're cooking. We'll clean after." James's hands were sticky with egg, and his face showed something Elena hadn't seen yet, focus without fear. Lily remained at her window. Elena brought a chair, sat beside her for an entire hour in complete silence. Didn't force conversation, didn't demand eye contact, just sat, breathing in rhythm, being present without requiring anything in return. The city moved beyond the glass. Inside, something small and fragile began to shift. Day 3 brought James's morning tantrum, triggered because his cup was the wrong color, or because the sun was too bright, or because his mother was dead and his father was dying, and 5-year-olds shouldn't have to carry existential dread like stones in their pockets. He screamed, threw toys, kicked the couch. Elena sat cross-legged on the floor nearby and started humming, low and steady, the lullaby Abuela used to sing. Duérmete mi niño, duérmete mi amor, not trying to stop the storm, just being present inside it. The tantrum exhausted itself faster than usual, 15 minutes instead of 45. Afterward, James approached cautiously and put his small hand on her knee. His face was blotchy, his breath still hitching. Elena covered his hand briefly with her own. Warm, steady. Then she got up and started making lunch as if nothing significant had happened, though it was of everything. Day 4, she brought both children into the kitchen for bread making. "We're going to make new things from broken pieces," she said, and it wasn't subtle, but healing rarely was. James punched the dough with therapeutic violence, yeast and flour flying. Lily stood in the doorway, watching but not participating yet. Elena didn't push. Progress wasn't linear. Healing didn't happen on schedules. Day 5 brought the breakthrough that changed everything. James's afternoon meltdown started like always, sudden, explosive, a tsunami of feeling he didn't have words for. But instead of isolating him or trying to calm him, Elena had an instinct. She brought Lily over, knelt between the two children. "Lily," she said quietly, "show your brother your hands." Lily startled, protective of her secret. But something in Elena's face, understanding without judgment, made her slowly extend her small hands. The fingernails were bitten bloody, raw, angry, a self-harm symptom everyone had somehow overlooked while focusing on James's louder pain. "You both hurt inside," Elena said simply. "The hurt comes out differently, but it's the same. You're not alone in it." James stopped screaming mid-breath, stared at his sister's damaged hands. Something passed between them. Recognition. They were both drowning. Neither had realized the other was underwater too. They didn't embrace, didn't speak. But something fundamental shifted. From his bedroom doorway, Marcus Chen watched this woman achieve what $50,000 of therapy couldn't. Tears tracked down his gaunt face. He'd been dying for months, but he'd been dead for years. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to be resurrected. Marcus began emerging from his bedroom on day 6, drawn by sounds he'd thought lost forever, his children's laughter, muted and tentative but real. He hovered in doorways like a ghost haunting his own life, watching Elena move through the space with quiet authority. She'd rearranged nothing, yet somehow the penthouse felt different, less like a monument to grief and more like a place where breathing was permitted. "Would you like coffee?" Elena asked without turning, folding laundry at the dining table while James built towers from the cloth napkins beside her. Marcus's voice came out rusty. "Yes, thank you." She brought it to him where he stood, neither forcing proximity nor maintaining distance, just offering without expectation. Day 7, James was helping Elena sort recycling. She'd transformed every chore into connection, every mundane task into therapy disguised as living. She mentioned casually, "Your daddy built amazing things before he got sick. Robots, I think." James's head whipped toward his father. "Real robots?" Marcus, hovering nearby in his bathrobe, managed, Yes, in college. They weren't very good." "Can you show me?" The question hung between them, an offering, an invitation, a bridge neither knew how to cross. Marcus nodded, tears threatening. "Maybe tomorrow, when I'm stronger." Day 8 brought a small miracle. Marcus sat on the couch while Elena taught James new origami shapes. Lily drifted closer, still silent, and perched on the armrest near her father. They didn't touch, didn't speak, but they breathed the same air without flinching from each other's presence. Marcus's hand trembled toward Lily's hair. He'd forgotten how to touch his own daughter. Elena saw him hesitate, gently took his wrist and placed his palm on Lily's shoulder. The girl didn't pull away. Marcus wept silently while his daughter leaned imperceptibly into his touch. Day 9, he asked to help with breakfast. His hands shook from chemo weakness, dropping the bread, burning toast. James giggled, actual child laughter that echoed off marble like music this penthouse had forgotten how to play. Even Lily's lips twitched toward something resembling a smile. Day 10 arrived with Marcus's first full meal at the family table in months. Elena insisted. The silence was awkward, weighted with everything unsaid, but they were together. Marcus looked at his children as if truly seeing them for the first time, not as problems to solve or futures to secure, but as whole people carrying their own mysterious interior lives. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for being gone when I was still here." James absorbed this seriously. "It's okay. You're here now." After the children slept, Marcus's phone shattered the fragile peace. Victor's voice dripped poison through the speaker. "I've been patient, brother, but you're letting some undocumented cleaning woman play house with my niece and nephew. Sign the custodial documents or I'll make this very difficult." Marcus hung up, terror crystallizing in his chest. Elena found him standing at the window where Lily usually kept vigil, staring out at the city lights. She didn't ask what was wrong. She'd learned to read the language of silence. "He'll come for them," Marcus said. "After I'm gone, he'll take them, and this..." He gestured at the space they'd created. "This will disappear like it never existed." "Then we fight," Elena said simply. "We? You asked me to stay. I'm staying." Marcus turned to look at her, really look. This woman who'd walked into his dying and refused to flinch, who'd seen his broken children and recognized herself, who stayed when everyone else had already left. "I can't pay you enough for this." It's not about payment anymore. Outside, the city sparkled indifferent to their small revolution. Inside, something worth protecting had taken root. But vultures were circling, and the real battle was just beginning. By day 11, Elena had established new rituals that transformed the penthouse from mausoleum into something approaching home. Each morning began with the 3 things at breakfast. Everyone shared 3 things they noticed, not feelings, which were still too dangerous, but observations that grounded them in the present. James: "Toast is crunchy, birds outside, Daddy's awake." Lily used hand signals, 3 fingers pointing at the window, the table, Elena. Elena translated without judgment. Marcus participated shakily, relearning how to exist inside his own life. "Coffee smells good." James's smile. Another day. Afternoons brought cleaning time, vacuuming, organizing, making things new. Elena gave the children control over their environment, let them decide what stayed and what transformed, the therapeutic power of restoration disguised as housework. Day 13, Lily picked up a dust cloth unprompted and wiped down her mother's photos. Tears fell silently, 4 months of frozen grief finally thawing. Elena held her while she wept without sound, rocking gently, whispering that grief was love with nowhere to go. So crying was just love escaping through the only door it could find. Day 14, Marcus asked to braid Lily's hair before bed, something Diane used to do, something he'd been too paralyzed to attempt. His chemo-weakened hands fumbled, creating crooked lumps instead of the neat plaits Diane had mastered. Elena guided his fingers patiently. "It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be yours." The braid was a disaster. Lily touched it with reverence. Day 15 brought James's blanket fort, a normal childhood thing that felt revolutionary in this space. He insisted everyone must enter, including Marcus, who crawled inside despite exhaustion and sat cross-legged in the dimness with his children. Elena told a story about a prince who got lost but whose children led him home. The metaphor was obvious, but truth rarely needed subtlety. Day 17 arrived with its own test. During bread making, James suddenly asked, "Did Mommy like bread?" The question froze Marcus. He hadn't spoken about Diane to the children, his grief too overwhelming, too sharp. Elena waited, creating space for whatever came next. Marcus's voice broke. "She loved terrible puns, and she sang off-key, and she called you two her wildlings." James absorbed this carefully. "Do I look like her?" "Yes, you have her smile." It was a tiny crack in the wall around their loss, letting light through where there'd been only darkness, but it reminded everyone that Marcus was dying, and this fragile new family had an expiration date approaching faster than any of them wanted to acknowledge. That night, Elena found Marcus standing in his children's doorway, watching them sleep. His face carried equal parts wonder and devastation, the joy of rediscovery poisoned by the knowledge of imminent goodbye. "Thank you," he whispered, "for teaching me how to be their father before it's too late." Elena touched his shoulder briefly. "You're not done yet. There's still time to give them something permanent." "What?" "Each other. And the memory that love doesn't require perfection, just presence." Outside the children's room, the city hummed its endless song. Inside, a dying man and an undocumented immigrant stood guard over two sleeping children, protecting something worth more than all his billions. Family built not from blood or law, but from the revolutionary act of staying. Day 18 arrived with James's worst meltdown yet, triggered when Marcus coughed up blood into a white handkerchief, stark crimson staining cotton, death made visible. James destroyed his room, threw books, toppled shelves, screamed until his voice went hoarse. "Everyone leaves, everyone dies, everyone goes away!" Elena sat in the doorway, letting the storm rage. She'd learned you couldn't reason with grief this big, couldn't talk a 5-year-old out of existential terror. You could only witness it. When he finally collapsed, exhausted and sobbing, she carried him to the bathroom, ran a warm bath, sat beside the tub fully clothed while he huddled in the water. "Your mommy left," Elena said quietly. "Your daddy is leaving. You're so angry because love hurts when it goes away." James's voice came out small, broken. "Will you leave?" Elena's instinct screamed to promise forever, to offer the comfort of certainty. But she'd learned something in her own grief-soaked childhood. False promises hurt worse than hard. Truths. "I don't want to, but I can't promise forever. I can promise today." It wasn't what he wanted to hear, but it was honest, and honesty was the only currency that mattered when everything else was slipping away. Day 19 brought an unexpected gift. Lily approached Elena in the afternoon, carrying her mother's jewelry box, the one they opened together each night for their grief ritual. She took out a delicate silver necklace, Diane's favorite, and held it toward Elena with solemn ceremony. Elena's eyes filled. She understood what this meant. Lily wanted her to have something of Diane's, wanted to share her mother's memory, wanted Elena to be part of their family history. "Oh, sweetheart," Elena knelt to Lily's level. "This is yours and your brother's. I can't take it. But maybe we can all take care of it together?" Lily considered this, then nodded slowly. That night, their ritual expanded. They opened the box, each touching the necklace, sharing memories and questions about the woman who'd worn it. Marcus joined them, finally talking about Diane to his children without his grief consuming the space. He told stories that made James giggle, that made Lily's eyes shine with recognition. Day 20 arrived like a reprieve. Marcus had what the hospice nurse called a rally day, a temporary surge of energy that sometimes came before the final decline. He played on the floor with both children, building block towers that James gleefully knocked down. His laughter sounded rusty, unused, but real. Elena captured a photo on her phone, proof that healing had happened, that these final weeks mattered, that love could bloom even in death's shadow. Day 21 night shattered everything. James woke screaming from a nightmare, thrashing in his small bed. Elena went to him, but instinct made her pause. She brought him to Lily's room instead, woke her sister gently. "James, tell Lily about your bad dream." Daddy disappeared and no one could find him. He was just gone and we couldn't say goodbye." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I dreamed that too. Every night." "You're both so scared of the same thing," Elena whispered. "You don't have to be scared alone." The children climbed into the same bed, James curling against his sister's side. It was a massive breakthrough, siblings finding each other in their shared terror. But when Elena returned to the hallway, Victor stood there in the shadows. He'd used his key access. He'd seen everything. His smile was predatory, triumphant. How touching. Unlicensed childcare from an illegal immigrant. I wonder what CPS would think, what ICE would think. He left without another word. The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Victor had been watching, waiting, gathering ammunition. Now he was ready to strike. Elena stood frozen in the darkened hallway, understanding with terrible clarity that everything they'd built was about to be tested by forces beyond their control. Day 22's morning, Marcus told Elena about Victor's leverage with shaking hands and fear-hollowed eyes. "You should go," Elena said immediately, already calculating. "Before he can—" "No!" Marcus's voice was steel beneath the weakness. "You've given me my children back. I'm not losing that in the time I have left." He mobilized lawyers that afternoon, starting immigration sponsorship paperwork. But the timeline was brutal. Months for approval, weeks left in Marcus's prognosis. They were racing against biology and bureaucracy simultaneously. Day 23 brought the first strike. Victor filed an anonymous CPS report citing child endangerment and exploitation of a vulnerable family by an undocumented caregiver. Ms. Patricia Reeves arrived unannounced at 10 a.m., professional, kind-eyed, but thorough. She interviewed the children separately while Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. James spoke glowingly. "Elena doesn't leave even when I'm bad. She makes me feel like my mad is okay." Lily, in her whisper voice, said simply, "She sees us, really sees us." Patricia observed Elena's interactions, reviewed Marcus's medical documentation, examined the children's therapy notes showing remarkable progress. She found nothing concerning. But she had to file a report anyway. The investigation was officially open. Day 25 brought devastating news. David arrived with drawn face and bad tidings. Victor had also contacted ICE with Elena's information. Abuela Rosa called, voice shaking with terror. ICE had visited their queen's apartment, asking questions, taking notes. Elena was now facing deportation proceedings alongside the custody investigation. Marcus, furious despite his weakness, called Victor, threatened to expose embezzlement from years past. Victor countered coldly, "Mutually assured destruction, brother. You die soon anyway. I'm thinking long-term about those children's welfare and their inheritance." Day 27 brought complication. Lily's school called. She'd drawn a picture in art therapy, her family. It showed Marcus in bed, James, herself, and Elena, labeled "My Real Family." The school counselor, a mandatory reporter, had questions. Another report to CPS. Day 28, Marcus met with his legal team. They laid out grim reality, 6 to 8 weeks left in his prognosis. Immigration sponsorship takes months, even expedited. If he died before completion, Elena's guardianship claim weakened dramatically, especially with active investigations. They needed something stronger, faster. A lawyer suggested tentatively, if Elena were family, spouse legally, the standing changes completely. Marcus stared. "Are you suggesting marriage?" "It's one option. Unusual, but legal." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He watched his children rest peacefully for the first time in years, knowing he might destroy this fragile healing to save it. He stood at the window where Lily used to keep vigil, staring out at the indifferent city lights. Elena found him. "There." "He'll come for them," Marcus said. "After I'm gone, he'll take them. And this," he gestured at the life they'd built, "this will disappear. Then we fight." "We? You asked me to stay. I'm staying." Marcus looked at her, really looked, this woman who'd stepped into his dying and refused to flinch. "I can't pay you enough for this. It's not about payment anymore." Outside, the city glittered, cold and vast. Inside, something worth protecting had taken root, fragile, precious, and now under siege from forces that valued blood over bond, credentials over character, law over love. Day 29 arrived with Marcus's impossible proposal, delivered awkwardly over morning coffee while the children still slept. "Marriage," he said without preamble. "Purely legal, on paper only. It protects you from deportation, gives you irrevocable guardianship, secures the children's trust with you as executor." Elena's coffee mug stopped halfway to her lips. "You'd be financially stable for life," Marcus continued, the words tumbling out like he'd rehearsed them all night. "The prenup protects both of us. Immigration status resolved. Legal standing as their guardian becomes ironclad." "You want to marry me?" Elena's voice was flat with shock. "I want to protect them. This is how." Elena set down her mug carefully, processing. Marriage to a dying man to become mother to his children. It sounded like a fairy tale written by grief instead of hope. When she told Abuela Rosa later that morning, her grandmother's eyes grew distant with understanding. "Mija, he's not asking you to marry him. He's asking you to become his children's mother after he's gone. That's a bigger promise." Elena spent the day watching Lily teach James to braid, passing on what Marcus had taught her, creating chains of connection. She saw the small family they'd built from ruins, fragile and real, and worth protecting. Day 31, she agreed, with conditions. "Full transparency with the children," she said. "Age appropriate but honest, and this changes nothing between us. We continue as we are." Deal. Day 32, they told Lily and James simply, "Elena is going to become part of our family officially, so she can stay forever and take care of you when Daddy can't anymore." James, ever pragmatic, like adoption? Similar. Lily, whispering carefully, "Will you be our mommy?" Elena knelt to her level. "Your mommy is Diane. She'll always be your mommy. I'll be your Elena, something different but just as real." The answer satisfied them in a way false promises never could. Day 33 brought the courthouse wedding. Marcus wore a suit that hung on his wasted frame. Elena wore a simple dress Abuela had pressed with trembling hands. David and Rosa stood as witnesses. The judge, seeing Marcus's condition, understood immediately what this was. Love of a different kind, sacrifice disguised as marriage. She expedited without comment. 12 minutes. That's how long it took to become a family in the eyes of the law. They returned home to find the children making paper birds at the dining table, their own small ritual continuing without supervision. Normal. Healing. Real. Day 34 brought the cost. Paparazzi somehow got tipped. Victor's doing, certainly. Photos of the dying billionaire's secret wedding to former janitor exploded across tabloids. The narrative was ugly. Gold digger, opportunist, exploitation. Elena's phone buzzed with messages from numbers she didn't recognize. Strangers with opinions about her character, her motives, her worth. The children's school called. Media attention was disrupting campus. Could they keep the children home temporarily? CPS scheduled another visit. The marriage raised new questions instead of answering old ones. Day 35, Marcus's health crashed from the stress. Severe pain crisis, hospital admission. Elena stayed with the children, but they were terrified. "Is Daddy dying right now?" James asked, voice small and breaking. "Not right now, but soon, yes." Lily, tears streaming. "I don't want him to go." "I know, baby, neither do I." James, "Will you go too?" Elena pulled both children close. "No, never, I promise you." The weight of that promise settled on her shoulders like stones, not to Marcus, not to herself, but to these two children who'd lost so much already. Marcus returned home 2 days later, significantly weaker. The countdown had accelerated. They had perhaps a month, maybe less. And now the whole world was watching, judging, waiting to see if love could survive scrutiny. Day 38 brought Marcus's retreat to full bedtime care. Hospice nurse visiting twice daily. The children were regressing, James's tantrums returning with vengeance, Lily's silence deepening again. Death's shadow had returned, and it was hungry. Elena tried maintaining routines, but grief was seeping through the walls like water damage, staining everything they'd rebuilt. Day 39, Victor arrived with Dr. Raymond Chen, no relation to Marcus, but plenty of relation to Victor's bank account. The child psychologist had been hired for a professional evaluation. He spent 3 hours interviewing the children with leading questions designed to elicit doubt. "Do you feel safe? Has anyone asked you to keep secrets? Do you miss having a real mommy? The children, confused and frightened, didn't perform well under this calculated scrutiny. Day 40 brought Dr. Chen's report, devastating in its professional cruelty. It claimed the children were enmeshed with Elena in unhealthy attachment born from manipulation, that Elena had alienated them from biological family, that the marriage was clearly coercive and exploitative. He recommended immediate removal to Victor's custody pending Marcus's death. Patricia Reeves, the CPS worker, didn't agree, but expert testimony carried weight. She had to act on the recommendation. Day 41, morning. Victor filed emergency custody petition, papers served. He demanded immediate temporary custody, claiming Marcus was incompetent and Elena dangerous. Court hearing scheduled in 3 days. 3 days to prepare for a battle that would determine the children's entire future. Day 41 afternoon, Marcus, barely conscious through morphine, gripped Elena's hand with surprising strength. "You have to let them testify," he whispered. "It's not fair, but there's no other way. Let them tell their truth." Elena felt something crack inside her chest. Asking traumatized children to speak in court felt like another violation, another way adults used children's pain for their own purposes. But Marcus was right. The children's voices were the only weapon they had against Victor's money and Dr. Chen's credentials. Evening came. Elena sat with Lily and James, explaining gently that they'd go talk to a judge about their family. "Just tell the truth about how you feel, that's all." James, worried. "What if we say it wrong?" "There's no wrong. Your feelings are yours." That night, Elena lay awake, terrified. Everything they'd built, the healing, the trust, the family forged from broken pieces, was about to be tested in the cruelest arena possible. The legal system didn't care about paper birds or braided hair or children sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. It cared about credentials, blood relation, traditional structures. They were about to fight a battle where the deck was stacked against them from the start. But they would fight anyway. Because sometimes staying, showing up even when the outcome seems impossible, is the only thing that matters. Outside the penthouse windows, the city glittered with indifferent beauty. Inside, a dying man, an undocumented immigrant, and 2 traumatized children prepared to prove that family wasn't defined by law or blood. It was defined by who stayed when everyone else had already left. With 2 days before the hearing, Elena focused on the children's emotional stability rather than courtroom preparation. She refused to coach them, refused to turn their trauma into performance. Day 43 arrived heavy with unspoken dread. They maintained their rituals, the 3 things at breakfast, bread making with therapeutic kneading, cleaning time that gave the children control. But death's shadow stretched across everything. Marcus was fading fast now, barely conscious most hours. Elena brought Lily and James to his bedside repeatedly, letting them curl carefully beside his wasted frame, holding his hand, telling him about their day, giving them time for goodbye before the battle. "Tell him we love him," Elena whispered. "As many times as you can." Abuela Rosa arrived that afternoon, bringing her fierce warmth into the tense space. She gathered both children close and told them stories about Elena's own childhood after losing her parents. "She was just like you," Rosa said, stroking Lily's hair while James leaned against her other side. "So lost, so angry, but she survived by holding on to love even when everything else was gone." The children absorbed this, beginning to understand that Elena's empathy came from shared experience, that she knew their pain because she'd lived it. Day 44 brought David with legal briefings that made Elena's stomach churn. Family court, judges' chambers. Victor would have Dr. Chen testifying about attachment disorders and manipulation. They'd have Patricia Reeves, who genuinely supported them, and Marcus's oncologist to prove his competency. But the core would be the children's voices. "What if they freeze?" Elena asked, fear cracking her voice. "What if the pressure breaks them?" David's honesty was brutal. "Then we might lose." That evening, Elena did something unprecedented. She opened Diane's jewelry box with the children and took out the wedding ring, delicate gold, worn smooth by years of love. "Your mommy and daddy promised to love each other and love you forever," she said, voice thick with emotion. "That promise doesn't end because people die. I'm making the same promise, to your dad and to you, forever family." She slid Diane's ring onto her own finger beside the plain courthouse band. Not replacement, continuity. Honoring what came before while building something new. Lily's tears came silent, but steady. Mommy would want you to take care of us. Yes, she would. James pressed close. We're going to tell the judge you're ours. Elena held them both, feeling the weight of their trust like sacred responsibility. Day 45. Morning arrived cold and clear. Elena dressed the children in their best clothes, Lily in a simple blue dress, James in slacks and a button-down that made him look heartbreakingly grown. Marcus lay unconscious, breathing shallow and labored. Elena knelt beside his bed, both children flanking her. We're going to fight for what you gave us, she whispered, taking his hand. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for trusting me with them. She didn't know if he heard. His fingers twitched slightly, maybe acknowledgement, maybe just dying nerves. They left him there with Abuela and the hospice nurse, walking into October sunshine that felt too bright for the day's gravity. In the car, Lily reached for Elena's hand. James gripped the other. They sat in silence, a small family about to be tested by systems that valued blood over bond, credentials over character, traditional structures over revolutionary love. But they had each other, and they had truth. Sometimes that had to be enough. Family court felt nothing like the imposing chambers Elena had imagined. Judge Margaret Okonkwo's office was warm, with photos of grandchildren on her desk and afternoon light filtering through half-drawn blinds. But the stakes were absolute. Victor sat with his lawyer, face arranged in concerned uncle expression that made Elena's skin crawl. Dr. Chen waited nearby, briefcase full of damning professional opinions. Patricia Reeves offered Elena a small, encouraging nod. Marcus's oncologist, Dr. Kim, sat ready to testify about his patient's competency. Judge Okonkwo studied everyone with eyes that had seen every manipulation tactic humans could devise. She was 63, Nigerian immigrant, and unimpressed by wealth or credentials when children's welfare was at stake. Victor's lawyer presented first, painting Elena as an opportunistic predator who'd exploited a dying man's guilt. Dr. Chen followed with clinical testimony about enmeshed attachments and Stockholm Syndrome dynamics, his words cold and utterly disconnected from the children's lived reality. Elena forced herself to breathe through the character assassination, watching her life reduced to pathology. Patricia testified next, professional and measured. I've conducted 6 home visits over 8 weeks. I've never seen a more attuned caregiver. Those children were suffering profoundly. They're healing now. Disrupting this bond would be catastrophic. Victor's lawyer attacked her lack of psychological expertise. You're a social worker, not a doctor. I'm someone who actually spent time with this family, Patricia replied evenly. Dr. Chen observed them for 3 hours. I've witnessed their daily reality. Dr. Kim testified about Marcus's mental competency, desperate but rational, making decisions in his children's best interest as he understood it. Then, Judge Okonkwo spoke the words Elena dreaded. I need to hear from the children. Lily entered first, tiny in the large chair, terrified. Elena wanted to run to her, shield her from this adult cruelty, but she could only watch. Judge Okonkwo's voice gentled. Lily, no one's angry at you. I just want to understand your family. Who takes care of you? Elena. The whisper barely carried. What about your Uncle Victor? He visits sometimes. He brings expensive toys. Lily's fingers twisted together. But he doesn't see us. What does that mean, see you? Elena knows when I'm sad without me saying anything. She knows James needs to move when he's angry. She fixed us. The courtroom held its breath. James came next, swinging his legs, nervous energy barely contained. Judge Okonkwo asked him the same question. Do you want to live with your Uncle Victor? No. The word exploded from him. Why not? He doesn't play. He talks about money and stuff. Elena plays, and she doesn't leave even when I'm bad. Are you bad often? James considered seriously. Used to be, not so much now. Why changed? His answer was pure, devastating truth. Because Elena said my mad is okay. I don't have to be so mad anymore when someone says your feelings are allowed. Judge Okonkwo asked her final question to both children together. If I let you choose, where do you want to live? Lily and James simultaneously. With Elena. The judge called recess to deliberate. 90 minutes of agony in a courthouse hallway, children pressed against Elena's sides. Victor, watching from across the corridor with unreadable expression. Then they were summoned back for the ruling that would determine everything. During the 90-minute recess, Elena's phone shattered the fragile hope, Abuela's voice shaking through the speaker. Marcus was in active dying process, maybe hours left. Elena stood frozen in the courthouse hallway, torn between two impossible choices: stay for the verdict that determined the children's future or rush home for final goodbye. David made the decision. The judge is deliberating now. You being absent could be interpreted badly. Marcus would want you here. The agony of it. Marcus dying alone while she fought for his final wish. The children sensed something wrong. Lily's eyes asked the question her voice couldn't form. Daddy's very, very sick right now, Elena said, honest as always. Abuela is with him. He knows we love him. They waited in that sterile hallway, James on Elena's lap, Lily pressed against her side, Victor watching from across the corridor like a vulture calculating when to descend. Elena prayed wordlessly to a god she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. Please, let us win. Let his sacrifice matter. Finally, they were summoned back. Judge Okonkwo's face revealed nothing as she surveyed the courtroom. Her voice, when it came, was measured and absolute. This case troubles me deeply, not because of Ms. Morales' character, which I find exemplary, but because we've arrived here through tragedy. She paused, looking directly at Lily and James. These children have suffered catastrophic loss. They were drowning. Ms. Morales threw them a lifeline. Victor tensed visibly. The marriage, while unconventional, was legal and appears genuinely motivated by Mr. Chen's parental concern, not exploitation. Dr. Chen's testimony, while expert, fails to account for the children's actual lived experience. She let that hang. I've spent 20 years in family court. I know manipulation when I see it. This isn't it. Elena's heart hammered so hard she thought it might escape her chest. I'm denying the emergency custody petition. Temporary guardianship remains with Ms. Morales, pending Mr. Chen's death and probate resolution. Judge Okonkwo's eyes fixed on Victor. Further, I'm ordering that any future custody challenges must meet an exceptionally high burden of proof of actual harm, which I do not see here. Victor stood, fury cracking his composed facade. Your Honor, this is... My ruling stands. These children have chosen their family. This court will honor that choice. It was over. They won. Elena couldn't process it through her terror about Marcus. They rushed from the courthouse directly to the penthouse, racing against death itself. The car ride took 30 minutes that felt like geological ages. Lily and James sat silent, sensing the emergency, holding on to Elena like anchors in a storm. When they arrived, Abuela met them at the door, tears streaming. Hurry! They ran to Psato, Marcus's room. He was still breathing, barely, but his eyes opened when the children climbed carefully onto the bed. Elena stood back, giving them this final moment. Lily and James pressed close to their father, small hands holding his wasted ones. Marcus's eyes found Elena's across the room. His lips formed words almost too quiet to hear. Thank you. Then to his children, my wildlings love each other. Those were his last words. He died at 7:47 p.m., his children holding his hands, Elena witnessing the end of one family and the beginning of another. The hospice nurse checked for pulse, marked the time, made the calls that death required. But in that room, surrounded by the people he'd chosen, Marcus Chen had died knowing his children were protected. Sometimes that was enough. 3 days later, the funeral filled a cathedral with hundreds of people who'd known Marcus as CEO, visionary, icon, but never as father. Victor delivered a eulogy professionally perfect and emotionally hollow, praising his brother's business acumen while managing not to mention Lily and James at all. Elena sat in the front row with the children, holding both their hands. Lily had retreated into silence again, expected regression. James hadn't cried yet, his grief locked somewhere too deep for tears. When it came time for family to speak, Elena didn't plan to, but Lily tugged her sleeve and whispered, "Please." Elena approached the podium on shaking legs, terrified. The sea of faces felt hostile, judging. The janitor who'd married a dying billionaire. She spoke simply. Marcus Chen was a brilliant man who built amazing things, but the most amazing thing he built was in his last months, a family from broken pieces. He taught his children that it's never too late to love. He fought to make sure we could stay together. That was his final triumph. She returned to the children. James finally cried. Great heaving sobs that had been building for weeks. The reception at the penthouse was surreal. Strangers filled the space the four of them had made sacred, eating catered food, making business connections over a dead man's memory. Victor approached Elena with barely concealed hostility. "This isn't over. The will goes to probate. I'll be watching." Elena, exhausted beyond fear. "Watch all you want. They're my children now." The legal term was finally true. Adoption paperwork filed the day before Marcus died. The next days blurred together. Lawyers, paperwork, journalists. Elena refused. The children struggled badly. James's tantrums returned with vengeance. Lily stopped eating. Elena felt herself drowning, wondering if she was enough without Marcus to guide her. 1 week after the funeral, she woke to find both children in her bed, wrapped around her like they were afraid she'd disappear. She got up, because that's what mothers do, and made breakfast. James threw his plate, the first time since the early healing days. Elena didn't react. She made another plate. He threw it again. She made a third. "You can throw food all day. I'll keep making it. I'm not leaving." James collapsed, sobbing. "I want my daddy." "I know, baby, me too." Lily joined them, and the three of them sat on the kitchen floor in a puddle of scrambled eggs and tears and grief. It was rock bottom. But from here, Elena knew they could rebuild again. Without Marcus's guidance, but with his final gift, each other. The inheritance that mattered wasn't money or property. It was this: permission to be broken, space to heal slowly, and the promise that someone would stay even when staying was hard. That evening, they did their grief ritual with Diane's jewelry box, sharing memories of Marcus now alongside memories of the mother the children barely remembered. Then they released paper birds from the window, more complex now, stronger, each one different, flying into the Brooklyn evening, carrying everything that had been and everything that would be. 6 weeks after Marcus's death, Elena stood in the kitchen of their new Brooklyn brownstone, watching autumn light filter through windows that actually opened, unlike the sealed glass palace they'd left behind. The probate hearing had finalized yesterday. Victor contested the will, of course, but Marcus's documentation was ironclad. Elena became executor of the children's $200 million trust, managed by professional trustees. She had no personal access, only authority to direct spending for Lily and James's benefit. Her first act, establishing college funds, therapy endowments, and a foundation in Diane and Marcus's names supporting children who'd lost parents. Victor received his inheritance, $15 million, and disappeared from their lives, recognizing defeat. They'd sold the penthouse immediately. Too many ghosts, too much marble. This brownstone near Prospect Park felt like breathing after years underwater. Smaller, warmer, full of possibility instead of grief. Abuela Rosa had moved into the garden apartment below, close enough to help, far enough to let them build their own rhythms. "Elena!" James burst into the kitchen, 9 years old now and finally filling out, his perpetual motion no longer frantic but joyful. "Can we go to the park, please?" "After homework." "But rules are rules, wildling." The nickname, Diane's name for them, Marcus's last word, had become Elena's too, honoring what came before while creating something new. Lily appeared in the doorway, still quiet but no longer silent. "I finished mine. Can I go read?" "Yes, baby." Therapy continued, individual and family. Dr. Sarah Park helped them process compounded grief, helped James with his ADHD diagnosis and proper support, helped Lily find her voice again. Elena had started community college classes toward a social work degree, wanting to formalize the skills she'd discovered through necessity. Abuela watched the children during her Tuesday-Thursday schedule. 3 months post-loss, they were establishing new normal. Friday movie nights, Saturday park adventures, Sunday cooking Abuela's recipes together, filling the brownstone with scents that meant home. They visited Marcus and Diane's graves monthly, bringing flowers and stories, teaching the children that love didn't end with breathing. One Saturday afternoon in November, they sat in Prospect Park, James climbing trees with the fearlessness Elena now encouraged, Lily reading nearby, Elena doing homework on a blanket. A woman passed with a stroller, smiled at the scene. Beautiful family. Elena looked at her children, still healing, always healing, but laughing. Yes, we are. That evening brought their ritual, Diane's jewelry box, sharing gratitude. James, I'm grateful for trees and not getting in trouble for climbing them. Lily, my friend Maya from Grief Group, she gets it. Elena opened her locket, Marcus and Diane's photos opposite Lily and James. I'm grateful for people who saw us when we were invisible. Your parents gave you to me. That's everything. They released paper birds from the brownstone window, more complex now, stronger, each one different. The ritual that began in a sterile penthouse continued through courtroom battles and death vigils, persisted into this new chapter. Some birds caught wind and soared, some tangled in tree branches, finding purchase to begin again. Like all families, imperfect, resilient, entirely their own. Elena closed the window and turned back to her children. James was teaching Lily some complicated handshake. They were bickering about whose turn it was to choose the movie, being beautifully, normally, messily alive. The inheritance Marcus left wasn't measured in dollars. It was this: permission to be broken, space to heal slowly, and proof that family wasn't defined by blood or law. It was defined by who stayed when everyone else had already left. And staying, showing up day after day, choosing love over convenience, building connection from broken pieces, was the most revolutionary act possible. Outside, paper birds flew into November darkness. Inside, three people who'd found each other through impossible circumstances continued the ordinary miracle of becoming family. One day, one ritual, one choice to stay at a time.